When we fought the Hollow Knight, he was broken. By time, by infection, by will. He even aided us in our fight against him, and so that ended up being merely an echo of his full power. The Pure Vessel is many people's pick for hardest boss in this game. He takes everything that made the Hollow Knight threatening, his massive hitbox and his variety of attacks, and combines it with overwhelming speed and double damage. Suffice it to say, this boss fight is the reason I make these bios. And in his bag of tricks, he has the triple slash, the lunge, the counter stance, the jump, the silver daggers, the silver plunge, focus, and void barrage. In effect, this is not unlike a dream rematch, and many of the attacks from the original have carried over, but all of them are more threatening in their own ways. The triple slash is once again a terrifying 3-hit combo that advances the Pure Vessel forward, covering a deceptively large area, including behind him and above him. Being safe from this attack necessitates being either very far or very high. The lunge is probably his simplest attack, being a straightforward dash along the ground like those we've seen since our first fight with Hornet. However, the combination of his size and speed makes this the most dangerous lunge in the game. The counter stance is virtually unchanged from how it functioned in the fight against the Hollow Knight, and like then, it poses very little threat if your Shade Cloak is charged. Simply dash forward as soon as you see you've triggered the counter, and you'll end up safely behind him. If your Shade Cloak isn't ready though, I'm sorry, but you're taking the hit. The jump is... okay, let me just bask in this moment for a second. Okay, this is the last time I ever have to go over a simple jump attack. And better yet, it has unique properties I get to cover. See, depending on how you go about this fight, you may never see the Pure Vessel use this attack. And that's because it exists purely as a means to counter excessive nail pogoing or other aerial strategies. The Vessel's AI seems to have a sort of timer that checks to see how long you've been in midair, and he'll only use this attack if that timer ticks past a certain point. If he does use it, he'll always target your exact position. I don't know exactly what number that timer counts up towards, but I know that it's high enough that we can avoid seeing this attack entirely just by touching the ground for at least a moment between each of his attacks. The Silver Daggers is an upgrade to his old Infectious Outburst attack. The major differences being that these all fly in straight lines, fire and move far faster, and sport these telegraphing lines that literally do not help at all unless you are significantly far away. This is one attack you practically need the Shade Cloak for. Unless you plan on spending a large portion of this fight on the opposite end of the arena from the vessel, which, by the way, you don't, it would take superhuman reflexes to avoid this attack's various spreads consistently. So instead, just work on timing the Shade Cloak so you dash through the daggers whether they line up with your positioning or not. Be warned, since you basically need Shade Cloak to dodge both this and his counter stance, it is not a good idea to try and get in too many hits on the vessel after dashing through the daggers, as this will be a time where your Shade Cloak will be on cooldown, and if he decides his next attack is counter stance, you're out of luck. So, after dashing through the daggers, just get in one attack and wait for whatever he does next. The Silver Plunge is probably his most dangerous attack, covering the majority of the stage with these spikes which raise far too high and far too quickly to be jumped over, and must be positioned between. The window between when you see their positions telegraphed and when they become giant hitboxes of death is suffocatingly tight, so, much like the daggers, it feels unreasonable to suggest trying to nail your positioning by reaction alone. The one trick you can take advantage of here is that one spike will always spawn directly in the position that the vessel's nail pierces the ground, and all the spikes are evenly spread. So, because of that, you know that the spaces directly next to the knight are going to be safe from the spikes. The issue then is that the Pure Vessel is kind of also there, so in order to avoid him and the spikes, you'll want to be nail pogoing on top of him. He can also begin this attack by both jumping towards you or by teleporting directly above you. But honestly, this is more of a good thing than a bad thing. Since he always targets us, he brings our somewhat safe spot directly to us. All that we have to do is make sure to avoid the plunge itself. Focus, thank goodness, does not give the vessel the ability to heal off the damage that we do, but rather is an aggressive parallel to our healing ability. He adds this attack to his lineup at 2/3 of his HP, summoning a massive circular hitbox around himself, followed by a smattering of smaller circles across the stage. This attack has both his longest windup and his longest cooldown, so once you're clear of the big circle, you can take advantage of his downtime pretty easily. Healing is possible, but risky. The smaller circles will rarely appear in the spots next to the large circle, but they still definitely can. So play those odds at your own risk. If things do go your way, you still only have time to heal one mask, so don't get greedy. Alternatively, you can launch Shade Souls at him once you're clear of the large circle, and as long as you don't get too into it, you should have plenty of time to dodge the smaller circles and whatever attack the vessel does next. And beginning at 1/3 of his HP, he'll add Void Barrage, which throws a bit of a monkey wrench into the vessel's otherwise clearly telegraphed attacks, as the windup for this attack looks a little too similar to that of the Silver Daggers, but requires a very different approach to dodging. Despite how high off the ground these Void Tendrils look, the ground is completely unsafe, so you'll have to avoid this attack by being up above. And chances are pretty good that the only safe spot is going to be behind the Knight, despite him usually appearing quite far away before using this attack. You'll basically need to use both your double jump and dash to make it all the way over there, but if you make good time, he's locked into this attack for long enough that you can rack up some decent damage. Now, I definitely glossed over a few of his attacks there because I wanted to get to our game plan as fast as possible. As I said, this is the fight that inspired me to make these boss guides, and that's because when I first fought this guy, he completely overwhelmed me, and I didn't see how it was possible to beat him consistently when he seemed to have every angle covered. Then I figured out a trick to him, and now I wish to share that trick with you. Every time you hit the vessel, immediately jump away from him. The biggest problem with his suite of attacks is that they are too wide and frequent to reliably dash away or through all of them, and too tall and quick to reliably jump over them by reaction speed alone. However, every single one of the Knight's attacks is either far easier to dodge or no more difficult to dodge if you're already in midair when he starts winding them up. So, from midair, here's how each of the attacks plays out. Triple Slash. You're already in position to nail pogo over top. In fact, you may even try nail pogoing twice in a row, just because he's that tall and fast. Lunge. Same as Triple Slash. You're already primed for a nail pogo. If he teleports to the opposite side of the arena to do this though, and uses it after you've landed, a Shade Cloak through will work just fine. Counter Stance. You've already jumped away. You're probably not triggering this, but again, if you do, Shade Cloak behind him. Jump isn't coming into effect, as long as you land between each attack. Silver Daggers. The most horizontal dagger is usually the easiest to time your Shade Cloak through, so if you're already in midair, you are in prime position to dodge these. Silver Plunge. Okay, so this attack is why you should always jump away and not just jump straight up, because the version of this attack that teleports in from above would definitely hit you if you're not moving to the side. And you can't jump towards the vessel because if he does the version of this attack that starts with a jump, that'll definitely hit you. So jump away, and when you see him priming this attack, use your double jump to get back on top of him and into our safe spot. Focus. You're already moving away from him, and so should be a simple dash away from safety. Void Barrage. Alright, now this is the one attack that threatens this whole operation, because if he decides to use this attack from especially far away while you're already jumping away from him, a double jump and a dash might not be quite enough to clear the distance to at least nail pogo on top of him. If he does put you in this situation, don't forget you can always fall back onto Sending Dark if you have the soul. Speaking of soul, you'll most likely want to use the vessel's staggers to heal, but be careful. He has hands down the shortest stagger state in the game. And unless you get extremely lucky and he follows up being staggered with a counter stance, you don't have time to heal more than one mask. It can be tempting to try because he always does 2 damage, but just don't get greedy. You'll get that second mask the next time he staggers. Alright, it's time to prove we truly are worthy to take up the mantle of Hollow Knight for ourselves. But Ascended changes very little. He now has 1,850 HP, and his phases still scale by percentage, not by exact numbers. But other than that, it's just the same fight, only with less margin for error. Now, the strategies that I gave against Attuned are pretty much the epitome of what I think is personally best against this guy, though I definitely am taking a little more damage than perhaps I ought to. So that's gonna carry us straight on over to Radiant. Honestly, I can't imagine that even if you've gotten all the charms, the deep focus, quick focus, that you got through that fight just scraping by and healing. So frankly, I think if you can beat him on Ascended, it's not too much of a bridge to beat him on Radiant. Though many people consider this one of the most difficult Radiant fights in the game, contrary to ones like Markoth and the Oblables, this is one fight that you can learn and just respond correctly to everything that he can do. There's basically an objectively correct response to everything he throws at you. And as long as you know what to do, you will get through it just fine. Unlike how I just did. No! Oh, I thought I was close enough that I could just spam it out. Man, I was doing so well. Now, even though I am struggling a bit, I really don't see any reason to overcharm here. With the strategies that I use, there's really nothing I want that I don't already have equipped. Gaining more soul with Soul Eater wouldn't help too much. We don't need to ever really use Nail Arts, because even with Nailmaster's Glory, he just moves too fast to really justify him. So I really can't think of what else I'd fill that space with. But that's okay. You don't always need to overcharm just because you can. Case in point. That finishes us off there. Pure and Radiant. Thank you all my fellow vessels for watching Boss Blitz. If you're curious to see some of my other attempts against this fight, or as well as just anything else Hollow Knight related, you can check out the playlist on screen, and chances are you'll find what you're looking for in there. The only bosses that remain are the ones that are exclusive to Pantheon of Hallowness. And so next time, we'll be taking on the Sisters of Battle.